This is a somewhat technical presentation. I don't expect to be able to go through all of it. So what I'm going to do is just highlight the high points of the presentation in terms of the actual opinion that has been issued by Al-Azhar's Islamic Research Institute and the grounds of that decision, as well as the grounds for the opposing decisions by the vast majority of Islamic jurisprudence councils. The whole presentation is up on my website at Rice University on Islamic Law and Economics, as well as many other presentations that will explain to you at least my understanding as an economist of what Islamic finance is all about. You'll find many presentations that explain how Islamic finance as it exists today is basically dependent very heavily on conventional finance and serves as a single degree of separation, basically creating medieval Islamic contracts between the Islamic financial institution and the public, and then proceeding to create counter contracts with the conventional finance industry to serve as a conduit for taking the extension of credit that you get from the conventional industry and make it available to the Muslims through an Islamic way. I think this is a good start, and what this does is get us to a point in history when I think that Islamic jurisprudence is going to have, Islamic financial jurisprudence as an economist, that's the area I'm most concerned with, will have to go through a complete rethinking process. And I think that the recent Azhar opinion that was issued in December of 2002 serves as a very important initial point in that direction. The rabbi's remarks about how what is Jewish law is understood through the rabbinical traditions is very, very much the same in Islam. But what is considered the forbidden riba is what the vast majority of jurists convincingly argue is the forbidden riba, and I think that hopefully we're going to go beyond the current Islamic finance industry. As the chairman said, this is a controversial opinion that was issued, and it's mainly controversial because of all the misinformation that surrounds it. There has been a strong trend because of the Islamic finance industry of trying to equate the forbidden riba with interest. And so what we get now are newspaper articles that say Azhar is permitting bank interest. Those are those who are in favor of the Azhar's opinion, saying forget about the Islamic finance industry. The Azhar has just said that interest is permissible, and therefore we don't have to worry about Islamic finance. And then those who are opposed to the opinion will say Al-Azhar is permitting riba. And of course, if you ever say that riba is permissible, then you have given up your claim to being a Muslim. So let's go quickly over what the fatwa does say and highlight the arguments on which it is based. And for those who are interested, you can always read the full presentation or email me. I'll be happy to discuss it further. So I'll go through the conclusions first, just in case I run out of time. The fatwa does not actually apply to conventional banks as they exist today and to jurisprudence that exists today. The fatwa talks about pre-specification of profits to an agent who invests in permissible activities. And since banks, by their very charters, are only allowed to lend with interest, and lending with interest is unanimously agreed upon by all jurists to be a forbidden enterprise, the fatwa does not apply to conventional banks. At best, it applies to Islamic banks, and I would argue that that's the good way to go. The fatwa does not permit bank interest on deposits and loans. Actually, the current Sheikh Al-Azhar in his books on the topic has argued extensively that what are sometimes called deposits are not really deposits in the jurisprudential sense. And I'm sure I'm not going to have time to get into the definition of what a deposit contract has to constitute. It's not a new opinion. It's actually echoing with lengthy quotations verbatim the opinions of many of the Age of Enlightenment in Al-Azhar, I would say, of Muhammad Abdu and Abdul Wahab Khalaf and Ali al-Khafif and many others of the great scholars of the past. And I think it can be the basis for establishing real riba-free banks when we go beyond the current state of affairs in the industry. I'm going to argue, and everybody who has dealt with this industry understands this, what are now called Islamic banks suffer from fatal flaws, and I think that the current opinion of Al-Azhar, if utilized correctly, can serve to solve that problem. And so those who are active in the Islamic finance industry, I think instead of trying to protect their terrain and their niche industry, if they think more of taking what's positive in this fatwa and what can be adjusted there to create a true Islamic financial system, would be doing Muslims a greater service than just attacking it and attacking the persons who are issuing it instead of discussing its substance. I don't think I have time to go through the whole fatwa, but basically what the text talks about is an agency contract, very much like the rabbi described, that the provider of funds goes to the bank and says, be my agent in investment, and I want you to specify for me a particular percentage profit. And they say, this is perfectly permissible. I don't have time to go through the whole argument. Let me go straight to the conclusion. So what the fatwa is about, what the opinion is about, is that pre-specification of profits for those who invest their funds in a permissible activity is permissible. Okay, so therefore equating pre-specification of profit to interest is what is at issue here. The fatwa did not say categorically that all bank interest is permissible. That is not what it said. Dr. Tantawi himself in his books has said clearly that if it is truly a deposit, a fiduciary deposit, then any interest on that deposit is not permissible, and interest on loans is agreed upon as forbidden. What the debate is about is basically what are called investment deposits. In Islamic banks decide to use the medieval simple silent partnership model, which in the Jewish tradition first emerged as the heter iska, and then Islam emerged as the mudaraba, with absolutely no basis in the Quran and Sunnah, but except for the Sunnah of approval, that it was practiced and the Prophet ﷺ did not deny it. And the question is, do you treat those deposits just because they have the word deposit as fiduciary deposits, as what the jurists would call a wadi'ah? And when there is a loan that is for investment purposes, just because it has the word loan on it, does that make it the same as the qard that the jurists spoke about, again, in the medieval jurisprudence? And finally, if it is accepted as an investment relationship, not as a deposit and not as a loan, when I deposit my money in the bank in something other than a checking account, I'm not really depositing it, I'm not really lending to the bank, then if we agree that it is an investment relationship, can they pre-specify that they will pay me a profit of, say, 5%? Again, notice that this is talking only about banks that will then use the funds on their assets side. So this is the liability side, how they receive funds from the public and then pay them a particular rate of profit. On the assets side, they have to be conducting their business in an Islamically permissible way, and so asset-based financing should be the modus operandi. So it's really talking about Islamic banks with possibly a change of their liability structure. Okay, more on what the fatwa did not say. There is very little disagreement about the issue that this is not a deposit. The difference is that the conventional jurists, the vast majority of jurists, use a very technical medieval juristic argument based on a medieval distinction between two types of possession, possessions of trust and possessions of guarantee. And you say in a fiduciary deposit, the depositary is in a possession of trust. But if they use the property, then any destruction of the property will have to be guaranteed, and therefore the possession of trust becomes a possession of guarantee, and therefore the contract becomes a loan. This is a pre-modern juristic argument based on a very simple legal framework, regulatory framework in which the jurists were writing, where those were the only two types of possession of property you could possibly have. You couldn't have liens, you couldn't have a variety of other legal structures that we have available today. So the disagreement then is about, can you really say that the deposit becomes a loan? That when you forward money to the bank under something called a deposit, investment deposit or otherwise, certificate of deposit, and then the bank uses that money by lending others or financing any operations, then automatically you have lent to the bank. And so I went to Al-Azhar and I argued with them about that issue, and they say, well, it's not really a loan unless the borrower comes to you and seeks to borrow. The bank doesn't come asking you to borrow. The bank is not in need for your funds. The bank just advertises that we have a portfolio of investments. We expect our investments to earn, say, 15%. and we are sufficiently diversified that we know that our profits will be somewhere between 13% and 17%, and we promise to pay you 6% out of that 15%. So the probability of actually earning anything less than that 6% is practically zero. And different banks advertise different profit rates that they're going to pay, and you go to them willingly to give them the money to invest as your agent. That is the Azhar's argument. The jurists, the rebuttal to this argument is, as I said, that the possession of guarantee is stronger than the possession of trust. If you're going to use the funds, then you're in a possession of guarantee. And as the juristic ruling says, there cannot be two types of possession simultaneously. And therefore, it becomes a loan. And any return on that loan, specified or not specified, is the forbidden riba. There is a debate whether or not there is any textual basis for the argument that if we accept, if we reject the issue about loans and just say, well, even if we accept it as an investment, pre-specification of profits, the jurists say, is not permissible. That, as the rabbi described, and in medieval Islamic jurisprudence, it's the same concept, when the two partners agree, one partner provides the funds, the other provides the labor and the expertise, they agree to share profits according to a particular formula, but then the provider of funds must bear the financial losses. So they cannot be guaranteed a particular profit share or profit amount. The Azhar jurists say there is no textual basis for this, that this was just a juristic opinion. Al-Qaradawi on his website argued that, taking the argumentum ad hominem aside, that those people are not knowledgeable enough about hadith to make that statement, etc., basically makes an analogy based on a collection of prophetic traditions on sharecropping, and says that sharecropping is the foundation for all the rulings on silent partnerships in Islam. In addition, there is a claim of consensus, and ever since Al-Shafi'i's codification of Islamic legal theory, which itself is not derived from any canonical text from the Quran and Sunnah, consensus has been elevated to the level of a canonical text. So if all the jurists at some point in time agreed on something, it becomes as authoritative as the Quran. So the Jurisprudence Council, a month later, with much prodding from jurists all around the world, who said you have to issue a rebuttal of the Azhar's opinion, basically answered by saying, by using two arguments. You don't have time to read all of this. I just put it for those who want to go to the website and read the translation of the text. But basically, they use the two arguments that I mentioned. The first argument is that once you guarantee the principal, it becomes a loan, and therefore any return is the forbidden riba. And the second is that there is the consensus, and consensus by itself is a proof. You don't need proof from the Quran and Sunnah. So they actually didn't refer to the prophetic traditions of Rafi ibn Khadij that Qaradawi and some others had mentioned. So let me go quickly. The issue of pre-specification is not new. There are many previous opinions that preceded. So, for instance, let me actually go straight to the. No, let me keep this one. Tantawi, what he did is he actually quoted Muhammad Abdun, Abdul Wahab Khalaf, and others on two issues. One of them is the idea of non-fixity of profits being a condition, a necessary condition of partnerships, has no basis in the prophetic traditions or the Quran, and that it is a juristic opinion that can be overruled. And the second is that what economists recognize as a moral hazard problem, that if you provide funds and the user of funds neither guarantees your funds nor gives you any way of monitoring his behavior and possibly removing him from the position as your agent or as the manager of the Islamic financial institution, then there is a great incentive for that person to lie. And so this is a fundamental problem with Islamic banks. And Dr. Rifat Abdul Karim, I'm sure, can speak about how he tries so hard to solve that problem within the context of Islamic banks as they exist today. But I think this is trying to fix something that's fundamentally broken, and maybe we're better off dispensing with this whole model and doing something much better. Islamic bank managers, they answer to the shareholders. They do not answer to those so-called investment account holders, profit-sharing investment account holders. And so the reward scheme actually encourages the managers to take high risks and to sell the highly undervalued assets in order to realize high profits for the shareholders, while the investment account holders, the customers, the providers of funds to Islamic banks, have to bear the brunt of the risk. The additional securitization possibilities add to the possibility of such gains trading. And so basically those investment account holders, the modus operandi on which Islamic banks do exist today is fundamentally false, because it's built on giving the investment account holders absolutely no protections. They are not first claimants on the assets because they're not debt holders, and they don't have representation on boards. The shareholders have a board of directors that can monitor what's going on and possibly fire a manager. But the investment account holders carry the most risk and have absolutely no protections in the contract form nor in the corporate governance. Again, as I said, there are interim solutions you can try to come up with, but if there's no reason from the canonical sources of Islam, you should have this defective structure to start with, then maybe we should look elsewhere, and I think the Azhar fatwa is a good place to start. Okay. So basically, can we still claim that there is a consensus? I think not. I think that it's been true since Muhammad Abdu that people have been questioning this consensus about the pre-specification of profit. And so once you have a small number of highly learned scholars who disagree with this majority opinion, we can't claim that it has the same weight as a canonical text. The fact that the majority believe that is important, but to side with the majority, you have to be convinced that this is not a harmful thing for the Muslim economy. Okay, let me go quickly. As a matter of fact, also, if you're interested in the study of this hadith, there are a number of other prophetic traditions that actually contradict it on the issue of crop sharing, and it's been questioned in every conceivable way. So that's let me skip that. I apologize. I know I have too many slides for such a short presentation, but I should have made a separate presentation for here and put the full one on the website. Okay. I want to show you one quotation which is quite interesting. Muhammad Abdu. Where is Muhammad Abdu? Yeah, here it is. This is something I have to say. There is something bad about Islamic finance. It smells like peddling religion, and this is something that I find to be very distasteful. You scare people by reciting the verses of riba. You know, this is the war, the pending war from Allah and His Apostle, and so on. And then you end up talking about a very fine technicality about what constitutes riba and what doesn't. And I think Muhammad Abdu made a very good point there. He said, look, yes, we can make analogies on what else is riba. We have the riba of the Quran, we know what that was. And we can make analogies about what else is riba, but it doesn't have the same level of authoritativeness. It is an analogy that is based on our own understanding. And he finally says, look, let's look at its effect. It may be riba. It's not definitively riba because it wasn't mentioned in the Quran. Nowhere does it say mortgage in the Quran, right? It's not mentioned there directly, but we make a strong analogy, but it's not the kind of riba that breaks houses. Now, if you have predatory lending, then that's clearly the forbidden riba. But if it's a different kind of riba, in a sense, then we say there's no way that the two of them would have the same degree of condemnation. So I feel there's a bait and switch that is often used by Islamic financial institutions, and I wish we would stop using it. So let me just go directly to my conclusions. The much touted, permission of bank interest is not there. It did not say bank interest is permissible because it does not say that banks lending with interest is permissible. But it does say that if you forward your money to some institution that invests in permissible things and earn a fixed profit, so let's say that institution is an Islamic financial institution that does asset-based financing, and knows that its asset-based financing will earn it 8%, and they can limit the credit risk because they are diversified across a large pool of customers, then there's nothing wrong, according to that fatwa, about paying 6% to your... They're not depositors, they're investors. And if indeed you have a catastrophic problem, say, with the real estate market, and people start walking away from their mortgages, and so there is an actual loss, then you're going to have to go to courts anyway, whether or not the contract said that they'll have to share in the losses, because you have to prove that you indeed did realize a loss, and Sheikh Tantawi said as much. So it does allow for certain types of fixed investment profit, and that can create a true banking industry, not a niche market, not a way for people to just please themselves by saying, yes, we're dealing with an Islamic institution, but really functional financial systems that are fully asset-based and that make sure that they cannot be used for predatory purposes. The basis for this fatwa is at least a century old. You can say all you want about whether or not Tantawi is a puppet of his government, which most people are fond of saying, but the track record of other people who share that opinion is impeccable. So we cannot just dismiss all those jurists all at once. On the other hand, we cannot dismiss the fact that the majority of jurists today are opposed to this opinion. So we have to basically do our homework. And I think collectively, jurists can't do it on their own because they're not trained to think economically. The public can't do it on its own because it cannot determine who is giving a good opinion and who isn't. Economists can't do it on their own because we only think economically. So basically, we need all Muslims, juristic scholars, other scholars, and laity to agree on what is going to be our interpretation for the future. What does an Islamic financial industry have to look like, rather than just let the I guess my bottom line is that we can't really claim that there is a consensus, and so something has to be done. We know that the current state of affairs in Islamic finance is very regrettable. And I hope that someday we can have a real industry. I was very supportive of the industry early on because I thought we're going to be moving towards better and better models. Unfortunately, I see it going in exactly the opposite direction. It's becoming more and more dependent on the conventional financial industry. It is starting to be more and more exploitative of its customers. And so eventually, I think we're not doing what we were hoping to do. And maybe if we have a paradigm shift, we can get there.